Career Timeline. Hi, I'm Cindy. Welcome to my career map. Sit back, grab some popcorn and a drink, and enjoy the leisurely ride down my memory lane. First, a short roadmap of where we'll be traveling in our journey together. And the timeline. The formative years. Toledo was a great place to grow up. Right on Lake Erie, an amazing zoo, great museums, Cedar Point and SeaWorld within easy driving distance, Detroit, Michigan less than an hour away. I show this first because, well, I'm adorable. Also because of my mother. She was my biggest influence growing up in terms of what a woman could be. She was an amazing mom without a lot of help from my dad. I can't remember a time that she didn't have a job until she retired here a few years ago. She had a very strong work ethic, stronger than mine most days. I admire her beyond words for the strength and grace she possesses, especially given everything she's faced in life. She's always been my rock. This is the house I grew up in, at least until sixth grade. It wasn't nearly this nice or this big when I lived in it, but it did have a massive backyard, a great neighborhood with a lot of friends and frenemies who loved to gather at my backyard to play, a lot of alleyways to ride bikes in, a lot of yard work and things to help my dad build and work on cars and boats and whatever else. It wasn't a perfect childhood, far from it. We didn't have much, but my mom always made sure we had enough, and that anyone in need could come to our place for a hot meal and a clean couch to sleep on. I was lucky enough growing up that almost all my family lived in the same city, especially on my mom's side. We were a really tight knit family until around sixth grade, but that's a story for another day. My grandparents were a huge influence on me. My grandpa Jack was in the Civilian Conservation Corps and then entered the Merchant Marines at age 17 during World War II. They resupplied the ships in the Pacific. He was taken hostage as a POW twice in his military career and survived both times. He never ever talked about it. I know now that he had severe PTSD after his experiences and came back from the war a very different man. By the time I came around, he was just the best grandpa you could imagine. He drove on every school field trip. All my friends loved him because he was a leadfoot and let them ride in the way back of the station wagon. My grandpa taught me that family is everything, and you have to have fun in life because no one gets out alive. My grandma worked during the war for Lockheed Martin building airplane components. She worked at many other jobs after, mostly for the city in administrative positions, while raising four kids and dealing with a severely traumatized husband. My grandma taught me to take no crap from anyone and to always go after your dreams, no matter what anyone else says. I say that I developed good leadership skills playing with my cousins growing up. The truth is, I was the oldest, I was a redhead, and I was a bossy, loudmouth little brat, so they all knew to listen to me or I'd torment them. Like when I somehow convinced Erica in the middle to get inside the toy chest, and I sat on it and wouldn't let her out until one of the adults heard her muffled screams. Like I said, I was a brat. Here's Riverside Elementary, the school where I went from kindergarten to sixth grade. This place was an old school bomb shelter, for real, run by an old school principal who still paddled kids for talking in the lunchroom, and I was a motor mouth. Our recess was an empty lot across the street with a large tree in it. Still, I have very fond memories. A few good friends. It was always hard to make friends for me. I learned a lot. I got to be a crossing guard for fifth and sixth grade, which was a fun leadership position, and meant I got to go to Cedar Point those summers. Throughout junior high and high school, my aunt, pictured above, became very involved in her assumed Native American heritage. Her best friend was an Ojibwe medicine woman. She invited my family into her circle, and we became involved as well. Walking the Red Road is what it's called. Living a life that is in tune with the spirits of nature, respectful to all life, recognizing that no one can own the earth, but we all have a sacred duty to protect and care for it and all life on it. Engaging in ceremony and celebration, and generally seeing the magic in all that is around us. This experience was a huge influence on my life. Maybe not so much on my career, but definitely on who I am as a person. For a lot of reasons, we moved to the south side of Toledo from the north side after my sixth grade year. All of my friends stayed in the north side, which meant I was the new kid among a large group of kids that had all gone through elementary together. Learning to fit in was a struggle, but it taught me strength and determination and to rely on my skills. My little house until I graduated high school. I began offering my services as a tutor and babysitter, and I started my own business, raising rabbits for pets and meat, although I pretended they all went for pets. I didn't get rich, but it sustained itself, and it bought me my first two cars and my first two computers. I'll date myself here and say that one of them was a Commodore 64. My junior high and high school were in the southernmost point of Toledo and built back in the early 60s. Racially speaking, the area was pretty much monotone white. Where I grew up was much more racially diverse, so I was not used to this. I also wasn't used to the prejudice I would encounter. My freshman year, the school district decided to start the practice of busing to make the school districts more racially diverse. In other words, they took busloads of kids from the inner city schools, where I grew up, and moved them to the outlying suburban schools, and vice versa. Needless to say, this did not go over well with everyone, especially at my high school. Why, you ask? Well, being the southernmost school in the district, our mascot was Rowdy the Rebel, a Confederate soldier riding a horse. Our school banner was, you guessed it, the Confederate flag. My class actually painted a giant Confederate flag in the student parking lot as a senior prank. Now enter busloads of African American kids from the inner city. Violence ensued, a lot of violence, mostly instigated by the white kids. Then the parents and alumni got involved, the ones who had gone to the school when it was perfectly fine to be a rebel. They convinced they convinced the students to stage a walkout to protest the talk that had begun of changing the mascot due to the violence and wildly political incorrectness of it all. My freshman brain, just beginning to start its social justice monotropism, decided that it was wrong not to change the mascot, and I blocked the doors so the walkout couldn't happen. Well, they got around that. Then I blocked them with flagpoles from the inside so they couldn't get back in. There's news footage of the walkout somewhere out there floating in the ether, with me in the background holding the doors with flagpoles in place. That and my ensuing years at that school taught me tolerance, taught me that one person could make a difference. It taught me to stand up for what I believe in, for what is right, to speak my truth and not let anyone keep me silent. I used to spend a lot of my free time in high school riding my bike around the campus of the Medical College of Ohio, which was mere blocks from my house. It was a great place to ride. It was also a great place to overhear a lot of discussions in lounge areas, and to watch some lectures through windows, maybe even catch a class that was meeting outside. It was enough for me to get a taste, and I wanted more. I became fascinated with genetics, read, studied, and learned all I could, and started making my plans to go to med school and become a molecular geneticist. I kept this to myself for the most part until I had a solid plan in place. Then I was ready to tell my parents. They were going to be so proud. Don't talk like you're one of them. You're not, even if you'd like to be. To them, you're just a freak like me. They need you right now. But when they don't, they'll cast you out like a leper. See their morals, their code? It's a bad joke, dropped at the first sign of trouble. They're only as good as the world allows them to be. I'll show you. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve. Christopher Nolan. That could have been written by my dad. He had a serious problem with anyone he assumed thought themselves better than him. I wouldn't know just how serious until years later, but at the time it was more than enough to have me in tears at his reaction to my career announcement. I left home 2 months early for college because I wasn't welcome there anymore. The undergraduate years. Despite the roadblock, I threw myself into college. I went to the Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio, majoring in pre-med. I lived in the honors dorms for a while, bottom left, and most of my time on campus, not in classes, was spent hanging out at the awesome library, bottom center, or the Kuhn Honors House and Amphitheater, bottom right. College taught me to open my mind and expand my horizons. It taught me the value of independence and freedom, but also the cost. It taught me the value of true friendship and that nothing lasts forever. But before all of that, college taught me, or should I say, my first real lab course taught me that I do not belong in a lab for the rest of my life. Nope, not for me. Too sterile, too repetitive, too just ugh. So I started looking for another career path. It wasn't until helping a friend through a crisis that I realized how much I enjoyed helping people like that. I started looking into psychology, and after my first abnormal psychology course, I was hooked. I wanted to find out how people's brains worked, how serial killers became serial killers, what was different enough about their brains, what was up with PTSD, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, all the disorders I encountered within my family or close friends groups. I needed to know. So I changed my major to psychology, with a double minor in comparative religion and women's studies because I can't ever focus on just one passion at a time. And I never looked back. That old country life. Then this happened. September 11th, 2001. I was driving to work at a Discover Card call center on the north end of Columbus when the news came on the radio. Live. I drove to work in shock, on autopilot. I got there and the big boss was telling everyone to go home, that we were closed until further notice. So I went home and I called my mom. Turns out my mom and dad had been looking to escape Toledo for their health and for my dad's mental health. My mom wanted to go full homesteader. They bought a 6-acre piece of property outside of Senecaville, Ohio, with an old log cabin on it. Spring water, septic tank, wood coal furnace for heat, no AC, 3-story barn with a bunch of outbuildings, large paddock, small workable farm, on a road called Mud Run, and boy did it live up to its name. 30 minutes from the nearest thing you could call a town. There was a lake at one end of the road, and if you made it to the other end, through all the hills, sharp turns, narrow passes, and frequent mudslides, there was a small hamlet with a church, a convenience store, slash one pump gas station, slash vehicle repair, slash deli, slash plumber, slash all around handyman shop. That's it. From Toledo to Columbus, both big cities, to way out in the middle of nowhere. No city lights, no cars, no sirens, no nothing. After 9/11, it sounded like paradise. I packed up my things and moved to Senecaville. We decided to raise Scottish Highland cattle, my dad and I, and my mom wanted to spin her own wool, so she wanted Jacob sheep. Those we brought home on a 3-hour drive in the back seat of an old Ford four-door sedan, the kind they use for police cars, in the middle of summer with the windows down. That was an interesting drive. We also had about 100 ducks, a dozen or so chickens, and 4 very mean geese. I would never trade those times I had on the farm for anything. I worked my arse off. I learned the value of hard physical work, of caring for other beings. I have stories galore. Lived with mud between my toes and under my fingernails and dust in my hair for about 3 years. Reforged a solid relationship with my dad. And just overall enjoyed the hell out of that life, inconveniences and all. That doesn't mean I want to go back to that. Like, ever. I like reliable plumbing, not running out of water, having a bathtub, HVAC, and not having to cart 100-pound bags of feed on my back up a muddy hill into a barn every few days. the graduate years. 2004, I met my future ex-husband, finished my last couple credits of undergrad, and enrolled in graduate school. I decided on Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia for its PsyD program and its proximity to both my family and his in Kentucky. Huntington is right where Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia meet. It's a college town, and it was an interesting, surprisingly cosmopolitan place to live. My house, the building I practically lived in, and the old main building of the university are pictured below. My PsyD program was amazing. I learned so much about who I was, how I thought, how to help people. It's where I really formulated what type of therapist I was going to be one day. I had so many very interesting practicum experiences. It truly was hard to decide what direction to take. I wanted to do it all. Just a few of the more memorable practicum experiences I had while in graduate school. Maximum security juvenile prison, where I requested to work on the serious violent offenders unit and the sex offenders unit. I wanted to challenge myself, and I learned so many valuable lessons. A community mental health center in a poor rural town in southern Ohio. That would prepare me for what I'm doing now. I learned the true value of mental health and the true meaning of Maslow's hierarchy. The VA on the neuropsychology unit, studying TBIs, military sexual trauma victims, and of course PTSD. I fell in love with neuropsychology here. West Virginia Juvenile Justice System. I worked at a school residential center for criminally involved youth with mental health issues. I worked as both a glorified babysitter and as a counselor. We were asked on day one of graduate school to declare our main school of thought: cognitive behavioral, Adlerian humanistic, or psychodynamic. I had no clue. I opted for psychodynamic because the mentor professor had a large poster of Captain Janeway on her door, and I was a Trekkie from way back, Grandma's influence. Turns out it was the best decision I could have made. This is the way my brain works, and I see the Neo-Freudian conceptualization in every client and reflected in every intervention that has come out in the last 2 decades. Everything was going great. I was planning for internship and dissertation. Life is never that easy, is it? My roadblocks hit all at once. Seriously, within 1 month, I found that my intern options were go to another state, leave my house and husband here, and pay 2 sets of living costs on an intern salary, or take a local internship working 60 to 80 hours a week unpaid, on top of paying tuition. All of that work, all of that time and energy, and now I was stuck. I had a miscarriage, probably from all the stress. It was early. I barely knew I was pregnant before it happened, but my husband could not grasp why I was upset and continually reminded me to get over it. My dad, who had been suffering with cirrhosis and liver failure for a while, was declared terminal and given 3 months to live. My husband couldn't be supportive and didn't want me to leave to be with my family. For this and a myriad of other reasons, I filed for divorce. My dad lived another year in misery, calling me daily, begging me to kill him. I had a breakdown. I ran away from everything. I left my house, my job, my school, my career, my friends, my life. The lost weekend. I went back to what I knew: customer service, telemarketing jobs, sales jobs, customer service call center jobs, horrible bosses and horrible coworkers, and hating every day, feeling miserable, unvalued, degraded, abused, mortified to admit that I had a master's degree and all of the coursework toward a doctorate, and I was working with people who barely graduated high school. This is what I really wanted to do, and I can't tell you how many times I watched this part of this movie over and over and over again. What I did instead, I got a new job with a great company. Still customer service, but at least in leadership positions, so I felt a little bit more valued. Unfortunately, I also began drinking a lot every night. I learned that you can't escape your problems and you can't escape your life. I use the metaphor of the overstuffed closet with my clients a lot. You can stuff all the stuff you don't want to deal with in your closet. Keep stuffing. Eventually, the springs are going to give. The closet's going to come bursting open and explode all this crap all over you. Or you can start now, unpacking the crap one box at a time in therapy. I was about to be covered in crap. It wasn't all bad, though. I learned a lot about myself, including that I need to feel valued and useful in my career, and I need to be able to help people. I learned a lot about what not to do, and I gained a ton of experience that has serviced me greatly in my career, enabling me to relate much better to my clients and meet them where they are. I also made some wonderful friends who taught me the importance of love without boundaries or borders, who taught me that being accepted for your true, authentic self is more valuable than gold, who taught me that love is love, who inspired me to focus my efforts in psychology on fostering understanding and acceptance for LGBTQ plus people, who inspired me to go back to graduate school. The present and the future. When the crap hit the fan, I was left with nowhere to go but home. However, home had changed to Oregon, Roseburg to be exact. My first plane ride, my first sight of the Pacific Ocean, and then here, nestled in a valley nearly equidistant to the ocean, the mountains, the plains, and the desert. Beautiful, really. Plus, my mom was here, with my new stepdad, who I came to love dearly before he passed. My mom moved out here because she spent several years living in Astoria when she was a kid. My grandpa had family out here. He used to show us pictures of Multnomah Falls and all the places he would visit when he came out here. A little cuteness in the form of my mom's little fuzzball Bailey. Career-wise, more of the same. Work from home, customer service, and the like, survival jobs. But I also enrolled in grad school again, this time working towards my PhD to bypass that whole internship deal. After a considerable amount of trial and error, I found two things that inspired me. My partner, Randy, and his sons, and a local nonprofit community mental health center called ADAPT. I applied and got hired on immediately as an adult outpatient therapist, licensure track. I felt like I was finally where I needed to be, back on track. I'm enrolled at Capella University, finishing up my PhD in general psychology, and taking this course at Bushnell to complete my LPC education requirements. I've had many passions since I've been in this field: personality disorders, profiling the monsters among us, LGBTQ plus affirmative care, etc. Working at ADAPT, I quickly discovered, through the gentle guidance of my colleague and friend, my true niche and the direction I wanted to go in my career. I also discovered a lot about myself, including the fact that I am ADHD, autistic, and ADHD. Nearly all the research to date on neurodivergence has been done using young white boys with typical hyperactive ADHD. We have virtually no research on young girls, precious little research on adults, or on high functioning, high masking, late diagnosed women. That would be me. The intense validation and relief that I experienced with finally understanding why I am the way I am was just life changing. I now live for moments when I get a client that I can impart that same sense of relief and validation and understanding to. That moment when the light turns on in their eyes and they finally realize I'm not broken beyond repair. I'm not hopeless. I'm just different, and I can learn to live my best life. That is why I do what I do. That is why I will continue to do what I do and narrow my focus a bit more once I'm in a place professionally to do so. What does the future hold? Hopefully getting out of Roseburg eventually. It's beautiful, but it's very politically conservative, and we dealt with a great deal of racism and bigotry here. It's not always a friendly place for those who are not the norm. The boys are growing up. One's away at college. The first one pictured here just moved to Utah. The youngest on the end is starting high school in the fall. Our values remain strong. To fill the empty nest, we have a couple of fur babies. Cuteness overload on the way. Um, but whatever the future holds, I know it will be inspirational, filled with love and laughter, and somewhere closer to the ocean. These are my babies. Myself and my partner. And for your pleasure. Dance, monkey, dance!